Hi, and welcome to Mrs. Pam Reads. Today, we are continuing our story, Shoeless Joe by W.P. Kinsella. This will be part 4, section 7. And in the last video, Ray's dad shows up as the catcher for, oh, sorry. Ooh, wow, that was bad. Okay, so yeah, I'm not a professional technological video person. It's just me and you, and we're enjoying a story together. Okay, so in the last video, right, Ray's dad, who is deceased in the real world, shows up as the catcher on his ghost team, maybe you want to call it. So let's see how that works. There is really something out there, isn't there? Says Richard's first words as he comes through the door. There's a faint odor of popcorn and sawdust about him. I nod. I know you're really not crazy, Ray. I wouldn't put it past you to put me on, though. He smiles, my most charming smile. Remember, they're identical twins. The one I use on my mother-in-law on holidays and her birthdays. But why can't I see it? Very few can. None of Annie's relatives or anyone who just drops in casually can see anything more than what I've built. I chose Jerry, Moonlight, and Eddie, but it wasn't exactly my own doing. It was like walking out in front of a full grandstand, the breath of 30,000 faces on me, the throng clapping, cheering, stomping, whistling, reaching out to be chosen. But it was also like having my hand guided to pick the right ones. But I didn't come here by accident. I didn't start reading phone books as if they were manifestos for no reason. Something guided me to you. Something made me move in here to be near you. You should hear me explaining that to my lady. As unsatisfactory as it may sound, we'll just have to wait and see, I say, thinking that I sound like Shoeless Joe Jackson sounded over the long months I waited for my catcher to appear. But earlier tonight, when my catcher was out there on the field, whistling the ball to second, calling out which infielder should take care of a charging infield fly, I sat as tightly in my seat as if I were glued there. I made no effort to go down to the field after the game to talk to the players, as I often do, until he was safely on his way to the center field exit. I was scared. There is no other word for it. How can I walk up to this man who will one day be my father and treat him like any other ball player? Perhaps Richard has been drawn here by something other than curiosity about a long-lost brother. The next afternoon, I go into Iowa City and stop by the change booth at the Midway. It is just large enough to hold 2 women sitting back to back on high stools and dealing out quarters, dimes, and nickels to the sparse afternoon crowd. I'm going to move in just a smidge, not to necessarily get close. Well, maybe to get closer. Let's see if I can get the lights out of my eyes. That might help. Okay. All right. I stop and look at the one who must be Gypsy. My God, he told me he had a twin, but I didn't really believe him, she says, though maybe he'd hatched onto some local fluff and was taking a vacation from me these nights. How did you know it wasn't Richard in a change of clothes? I ask. The eyes, the eyes. Richard's are harder than yours. His look is like jade that might crack any second. This is making me crazy, you guys. I am so sorry. Let me see if I can tweak it up a little. It's just like, wow. Okay, better, I think. So Richard's eyes are like jade. Yours are warmer, wittier. You've probably loved somebody very much. And are you a fortune teller too? I have been. You do whatever you have to do in this business. I want to look you over. Hey, Molly, I'm taking a break, she says to the woman behind her, who nods the back of her blonde wig to acknowledge the statement. I'm Gypsy, she says, sticking out a small brown hand. She is tiny and wiry with straight black hair and looks like an untidy pile of shingles. She is wearing a black t-shirt with a silver picture of an unfamiliar rock singer on it, blue jeans, and black cowboy boots. She has a small tattoo on her left forearm. Her mouth is thin, her smile ironic. You haven't seen the show, she says, waving her hand toward a 20-foot trailer, partially hidden behind canvas banners, splashed with garish pictures and lettering. We have a truck with a camper that we live in and use to pull the trailer from town to town. In the background, Richard's voice emanates from a chipped black speaker wired to the rod, holding up the canvas banners. Stay as long as you like. Come out when you're ready. You owe it to yourself to see these strange babies. You've read about them, heard about them. Now come in and see them. Can I? I nod toward the trailer. Gypsy takes a pack of Winston's from her t-shirt pocket, shakes out a cigarette, and lights it. She grins up at me, smoke leaking through her teeth. Why not? Richard and me bought it from the grandson of the owner. Old man died 2 years ago while we were wintering in Florida. We climb a ramp that leads to the door of the trailer, where a sad-looking man in a greasy black jacket and baggy overalls sits on a backless chair. Hey, Owen, Gypsy says to the man. Going on a cook's tour. She parts the faded blue velvet drapes, which are decorated with amber watermarks. The man, Owen, scarcely nods. If he sees me, he assumes I'm Richard. Inside, Richard's voice, my voice, becomes indistinct and mixes with the midway sounds. The trailer smells of dust and rose-scented room freshener. The floor is covered by cheap brown brindled tiles, and one or two have their corners sticking up like marked playing cards. The walls are draped with faded blue velvet, and about a dozen containers of glass, like built-in fish tanks, are set at intervals. Each one contains a photograph. Of a mystery, I'm going to say. The photos are black and white, faded and curled around the edges. Some of the explanatory cards have fallen face down or lay at odd angles. The bottom of each container was at one time covered in fuchsia-colored velvet, but in places it has faded to a pale pink. Dust, grit, and dead insects cover the bottom of most of the containers. Is this all? I ask. What did you expect? Says Gypsy, blowing smoke. This is a seventh-rate carnival. The posts are bigger than the rings you toss at them. There's lead in the milk bottles. Lead in the milk bottles. The darts are made of bamboo, so if you breathe as you throw, they drift a foot. Wow, this is a carnival. People pay to be disappointed. I guess from hearing the pitch, I expected more, at least a specimen floating in alcohol. You've lived in the country too long, Ray, she says with a good-natured smile. She closes one eye when she smiles. Ooh, how much does it cost? Wow, this is a rough video today, guys. Sorry. How much does it cost? 75 cents. But moneymaker, best moneymaker on the Midway. No overhead. If it's profitable, why not clean it up? What do you want? A science lab? People expect scruffy stuff. They don't go in there because of scientific curiosity. They go because they want to be shocked. They want to come out and say how awful it was and how scummy, sickening. Something they can talk about with all their friends. And when the friends think nobody is looking, they'll sneak in and see if it was as bad as they heard. Would you tell me something, Gypsy? I might. Your first name? Want to get one up on your double? It will be our secret, I promise. But why? What does it matter? Can't you tell? She looks at me, figuring the angles and the odds, the tiny lines around her eyes and the mouth, fanning out as she flexes her facial muscles without smiling. Our secret, she says, holding out her small dark hand for me to clasp. Our secret. Annie, she says, smiling through her teeth. On the drive back to the farm, I recall our childhood. And as I do, I realize that it was I and not Richard who was fascinated by carnivals and midways. I believe it was the Laughlin Midway that used to come to Great Falls for a week each summer. When we were little, Dad used to take us on the rides and feed us outrageous amounts of ice cream, hot dogs, burgers, and cotton candy. We would tour the Midway and listen to the spiels of the pitchmen. He would take us to see the freak show, the dancing waters, and even the girly show. Harlem in Havana, it was billed, which, in retrospect, seems as tame as a dancing class. The year we were 9, my father decided we were capable of traveling the grounds alone and gifted us with enough money to make our usual tour. Richard, however, chose to accompany my father to the horse races, while I ambled off to explore the Midway on my own. The carnival was set up in an open field at the edge of town, and the ground had been generously covered in sawdust and iced with cedar shavings. It had rained during the night, and the shavings and sawdust had mixed into the ground to form a firm, pungent base. By mid-afternoon, I was walking along Game Row, which consisted of 24 booths where you threw balsa wood darts at half-inflated balloons or tried to knock 3 plaster bottles off a milking stool using soft balls as rolled-up socks. I stopped to listen to the spiel of the barker at the milk bottle booth. He had a crooked arm that he used to attract attention and wave people in, and I followed the arm as if it were hooked around my neck and gently easing me forward. There were a dozen or so people around the booth, and the carney and his assistant, a brush-cut youth with eyes tiny as black peas, gently baited the customers and kept them trying again and again to not only knock the bottles over, but clear them from the top of the stool. The carney, his hair tuft, face square and scruffy looking as a tomcat, would set up the bottles, take a ball, bend over, and fire it between his legs, and the bottles would fly off in different directions. Then he would taunt his audience. Look at that. If an old one-armed side-hill gouger like me can do it backwards, you big strong fellas should be able to do it frontwards. And you get 3 tries to do it, only 3 for a quarter. And the big farm boys and squinty-eyed cowboys in denim would step forward, pluck down their money, and fire wildly at the bottles. I worked my way forward, mouth hanging open in fascination, as I listened to the carny and watched the balls. Watched the balls smacking into the canvas behind the target or hitting the bench and ricocheting about the tent like trapped birds. There was a row of trunks across the mouth of the booth. The white balls rested on the battered green and brown surfaces. As I watched, I imagined the carny and his assistant packing the trunks full of green and vermilion feathered monkeys on sticks, which were the prizes, and heading out for a new town. I moved in until, pressed forward by the crowd, I sat down on one of the old mistreated trunks at the far right of the booth. I must have been there half an hour when the crowd thinned out, the big-shouldered farm boys walking stiffly away, ignoring the carny's entreaty to try it one more time. There, Sonny, you almost won last time. Look, I'll show you how it's done. There was one man in a dirty suit coat playing, and 2 or 3 gawkers when the carny noticed me. What are you doing there, kid? He said loudly, moving towards my corner of the booth. I was startled and jumped down from where I had been sitting. He could see I was scared and pressed his advantage. Look what you done to my trunk. Look at the dents you put in it. I looked at the battered metal. It was difficult to see where one dent started and another finished. You're going to have to pay for that, kid, he said. And I could feel my eyes getting larger. I shuffled my feet nervously in the dry shavings at the base of the trunk. How much money have you got? The carny asked, moving over in front of me. I dutifully reached in my pocket and pulled out $1 and a few coins. I counted carefully. There was $1.80. Kid, you done $20 worth of damage to that trunk. You're going to have to make it up some way. He was close to me. His face was scarred and craggy like a map of Montana, all mountains, lakes, and plains. He smelled of sweat and cigars. He had a black canvas apron tied around his waist. His good left arm was brown as an Indian's. I could imagine him calling my father and making him pay for the damage I had done. And then the long, silent ride back to Deer Lodge in the pickup truck with my father furious, my brother nudging me in the ribs and laughing. $1.80, he said scornfully. Is that all you've got? I looked at him, wide-eyed, and nodded. Okay, kid, listen. I tell you what I'm going to do. You can work it off. I felt like a car had just been lifted off my chest. I stood eager as a dog, waiting for the stick to be thrown. You know where the freak show is? I nodded that I did. Well, I want you to run down there and tell the barker that I sent you to get the left-handed glass stretcher. Then you bring it back to me, and I'll let you off the hook. He smiled, showing short, yellow-stained teeth. I sprinted across the sawdust, shavings crinkling around my ankles. At the freak show, the barker was in the middle of a spiel. A beautiful girl in a bathing suit with a red satin cape over her shoulders stood to his right, looking tired and bored, while behind them, just inside the flimsy brown curtain, stood a man in formal outfit, complete with top hat and white gloves, holding a black-handled handsaw that was at least 4 feet long. The barker was telling the crowd that in just a few moments, the great Mancini who was making a special appearance with the Laughlin Midway, direct from performing before all the crowned heads of Europe and Asia, would dazzle and mystify them by sawing this very alive young lady in half before their unbelieving eyes. Mancini bowed slightly and raised his hat, revealing slick black brilliantine hair. The girl ran a hand languidly across her belly to show where the wicked-looking saw was going to do its work, and the barker began to pitch to sell tickets. I snaked my way through the crowd until I was at the stage, which came up to the middle of my chest. I stood on tiptoe, reached forward, and tapped the barker on the toe of his run-down black loafers. He glanced down and continued with the spiel. The great Mancini and the caped girl stood like wax dummies. I stretched up and tapped again, harder, like knocking at a door after receiving no answer. The air smelled strongly of cedar shavings, and as I glanced down, I saw that I was buried ankle deep in the red and white curlicues. The carny swung his microphone around away from his body and hissed down at me. "What do you want, kid?" "The guy down there," and I waved vaguely in the direction of the game booths, "wants the left-handed glass stretcher." There was a long pause as he at first looked puzzled. Then, as a light began to shine in his eyes, he smiled. "Just a minute, kid," he said, and parked his microphone on its stand. He walked back past the catatonic figures of Mancini and the girl and dug into a wooden chest that was painted in a pale battleship gray. The people up close who had been listening to the carny's spiel were now looking at me. And that's where we're going to stop. Well, we didn't hear anything about Ray's dad that time. We're just hearing about how he loved a carnival, and what's his name? The brother, Randy, I think, the brother, was the one working for the carnival. I don't know what I'm doing, you guys. It has been a day. Here I am messing with the light. Okay. Hey, maybe next video we'll find out more about Ray's dad. I hope. All right, you guys. I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you for sticking with me through my confusion and muddling and etc. We'll all have a better day tomorrow, right? Of course. Thanks, guys. Have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye. I said tomorrow. I don't know that it'll be tomorrow. I'll see you next time, whenever you decide to tune in again. All right. Bye.